Hello.
Hello, Michael. Just a second. I got to get my light on. There we
There
go.
you go. I need more light, but it's okay.
You do need more light.
I'll just get a little closer, see?
It still needs more light. Don't get closer,
I'm gonna
Michael.
open the blind.
Okay, Nur, I'm just following your coattails today.
What?
You made this great presentation, so I'm just gonna, live off that.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, it's a little bright, don't you think? I gotta turn that
That's
down.
better.
Just a second.
Nur, how do you say your last name correctly?
Foster.
Kosser.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to go ahead and give it a couple more minutes for people to sign in. So feel free to run to the bathroom really quickly or grab a snack or anything, but we'll get started in about 2 minutes here.
Can the big group hear us?
Yes, everyone can hear you right now.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know.
Andrea, you're gonna allow me to share the screen, correct?
Yes, so everyone should have the share screen button at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah.
It should be enabled where you can share it, but I will be sharing my screen here shortly so we can do a quick introduction and then I'll hand it over to you all.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started. Happy afternoon, happy Monday afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Solis and I am staff to the Housing Collaborative. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and the rest of the staff, I'd like to welcome you to our 9th annual San Joaquin Valley Affordable Housing Summit, Standing Together by Staying Apart. Today's webinar is Regional Housing Planning Efforts Underway, which we're really excited to hear about. So just to give you a quick intro to the organization, the San Joaquin Valley Housing Collaborative is a regional nonprofit formed out of the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley in 2009. The Housing Collaborative exists to address housing issues affecting low to moderate income households in the Valley communities by advocating, building capacity, and collaborating for affordable, healthy neighborhoods and communities. And while typically we like to do these sessions in person and bring everyone together for our in-person summit, this year is just obviously not possible, but we're excited to bring you the same resources to you virtually. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to our panel today. We're super excited and can't wait to hear about all the new projects that are happening.
Thank you, Andrea. I'll take the lead on this. Host disabled. I can't share screen though. It just says host disabled.
Okay, 1 second. Let me. Okay, try it now.
Okay. Can everybody see that? Should I put it on full screen?
It says end of slideshow.
That's it. We're done.
How about now?
It's still the same.
Gives me more time to look at Bill's soft focus there. It's
Yeah, it says end of slideshow.
nice effect.
How
Oh, there we go.
about now?
Yep, we can see it now.
Okay, should I put it on full screen then?
Yeah. And we're only seeing part of your screen, so you might want to share the window because we're seeing a very small PowerPoint.
So you're getting bigger?
It's getting bigger. Yep.
Oh, okay. How about now?
Yeah. Now switch it to slideshow and you'll be ready.
It's a PDF.
Oh, okay. Then we'll deal with it. Because all those slides that I made for the
I think you have to
presentation
scroll
are-
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let me get past the first two pages and I'll put it on full screen. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining this webinar today. This is Michael Segala. I'm an urban planning, affordable housing, transportation consultant out of Clovis, Fresno area, but I work with a lot of the people on this group that you hear from today. There's a lot of moving parts in California, as you know, and we have a lot of good experts on the webinar today to talk about it, but just a few things. Obviously the Valley has its differences and its similarities with the rest of the California, and differences and similarities within itself. We have a big affordable housing need. There's a lot of poor folks. Density is an issue with our communities, transportation access, capacity in terms of local funding for housing. So there's all kinds of issues, and at the same time, the state is seeing this interest in growth in meeting the needs of the state that are consistent with us and sometimes different. So housing and transportation is very important to Sacramento, and that's why a few of our panelists today represent those efforts, and we'll get underway in understanding what that means for the Valley here. Oops. Okay, so for today, these are the main topics that we'll cover in this hour or so presentation. I'll give the introductions to our panelists in a second, and then we'll talk about the big picture of housing planning in California and how it's become a priority for the state. You'll hear about the Regional Early Action Program, which is the main part of this presentation and the main source of regional funding coming to the San Joaquin Valley. We'll get a perspective we'll get other state perspectives on housing and transportation and everything else. And then we'll hear about the state technical assistance, which is another majorly funded initiative for local jurisdictions. Then we'll roll into where the San Joaquin Valley fits on this regional planning effort, and what are we doing now, and what are sort of the next things coming up. And then we'll open it up for discussions and questions and answers. So today's panelists, and I'll ask that they say hello so you can see their faces. First one is Nur Kassar, Housing Policy Manager with State HCD. Nur.
Hello, everybody.
Then we have Paul McDougall, he's with Nur. Paul? Okay.
I'm here. Sorry about that, Michael.
Didn't see your face. Then we have Bill Higgins, who's the Executive Director of the California Association of Council of Governments. Bill. And Robert Phipps, Deputy Director of Fresno Council of Governments. And then myself, Michael Segala. So I will put it on full screen here because I was looking at other stuff, and I will turn it over to Nur to roll us into the Regional Early Action Program, and we'll hear from Bill Higgins on this one as well.
Great, thank you, Michael. Looks
And
like,
just tell me when you want me to move it down.
okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'll just roll right into our conversation. So the state of California, and Michael, you could probably keep moving actually onto the next slide. But the state of California has recently, for the first time ever, put a lot of money into planning for regional housing needs for the state. This is kind of an unprecedented time for California, and I'll talk a little bit about the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program. You may have also heard about the Local Early Action Planning Grants. Those were both part of AB 101. which address the need to increase some funding and planning, and then ultimately accelerating housing production around the state. You also probably heard about the Senate Bill 2 planning grants. Those were prior to REAP and LEAP to kind of help kickstart the process. But I'll talk about those as well as some of the other tools that have been created by the state to kind of meet this need and this large-scale investment at a regional level to not only plan for housing, but ensure that housing gets built. And we use some of our accountability tools at the state to make that happen. Next slide, Michael.
Well, this was the next slide.
Can you keep scrolling?
Can you see that?
No.
It's not moving down?
It's not. That's okay. I can just kind of narrate.
Let's try to fix it. How about now?
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so just taking a quick step back, and Bill, feel free to jump in as far as, from an outside of the state perspective. But as far as the state of California goes, California law has repeatedly indicated that housing is an issue of statewide concern. But, I could candidly say that probably our investment historically has not really showcased this until recently. California Government Code says the availability of housing is of vital statewide importance, and the early attainment of decent housing and suitable living environment for every Californian, including farm workers, is a priority of the highest order. And so you'll learn, as we kind of go through what REAP is and kind of what these planning grants are for. This is really the first time that we've taken, I think, what this code says and put some teeth into what we're talking about here. We're going to be building capacity across the state. We're providing unprecedented technical assistance from the state level and from a consulting standpoint. We're partnering with nonprofits. We're partnering with developers. We're partnering with folks like CalCog and Bill Higgins to make sure that everyone's kind of working together to meet this goal that we've been talking about for a long time, but we really just haven't invested in. You can go to the next slide, Michael. As far as what we're talking about in terms of need, this is more of a statewide look at the numbers. And I know you guys have heard from some of our partners earlier on in the summit on some of the more regional numbers. But as far as HCD's projections, we're looking at over the next 10 years, a need for 1.8 million units or 180,000 annually. And then you can see some of the other gaps. I think of particular importance is really the extremely low income shortfall. I recall earlier on in the summit, we heard from CHPC, the California Housing Partnership, and as far as the San Joaquin Valley goes, these numbers are pretty reflective actually in the Valley and statewide. There is normally more of an increase or a surplus the above moderate income level, but the ELI shortfall is both large in the Valley and statewide, and you can see, very low income also, so that's 50% and below is the more commonly cited number. So we've got a 1.5 million unit shortfall there as far as the state of California goes. You can go to the next slide, please. So kind of going through what the state has been doing to address this need. Obviously in 2017, we had the 15 bill legislative housing package that kind of helped spearhead a few of these tools that we now have in our toolkit. SB2 was part of that package, and so we were able to not only get funds for planning grants, but we also have an ongoing source of funding for affordable housing. That first year of funds, along with the planning grants, half of that was also used to address homelessness. And so moving forward, we're going to see, the local PLHA dollars really rolling out every year in helping address the housing crisis. Following that, we had the Budget Act of 2019-2020, and that's where you'll see both LEAP and REAP. And so that's direct planning dollars. For LEAP, it was directly to jurisdictions, so cities and counties. For REAP, it was based on statute and goes to councils of governments, two multi-agency working groups, one of which is the San Joaquin Valley and was created in statute, and I'll go over what that looks like. And then also counties that were not covered by a council of government would also be receiving REAP funds. And so there's overall about, let's see, what was that, $200 million going out? I'm trying to remember what the total amount was now. Phil, do you remember?
It's closer to 400, I believe, when you get in the SB2.
400 total, when you tie it all together. So, yeah, as I was saying, kind of an impressive number for planning, which is great. And really, the reason the state wanted to do this is it's pretty blatant. So we saw the regional housing needs allocation for the 6th cycle. It's what we assign each region across the state in terms of housing needs. The latest cycle was far greater for most of the state than the previous cycle. Each cycle is normally about eight years. So we're heading into the 6th cycle. Some folks are already in it. Some folks are planning for it now. And that basically means that they're working on their housing elements for this next cycle. But because the numbers increase due to improving our methodology on how to figure out housing need, really looking at our accounts, looking at equity issues, looking at homelessness, and figuring out truly where the issues lie. We realized not only is the need far greater than we had planned for the previous cycle, but in order to really meet that need, we're going to, as a state, need to invest more directly and assist local jurisdictions with meeting those needs and coming up with better ways of planning and streamlining affordable housing production. And then the final thing you'll notice on this slide is the pro-housing regulations. Those have not come out yet. But they will soon. And that was kind of part of the package where you have planning grants, and then you have this incentive for communities to become pro-housing. So, show us that you've done some really good planning, that you really want to, partner with the state and invest in your community, and you'll get some extra points on some of your forthcoming affordable housing development funding applications. And so there's going to be a couple of areas, a couple of different programs that will impact, including
Nur, I might just, maybe what I'll do instead of I'll just jump in and add a couple of words to what you did, because I think that a couple of points you made on this slide are really important. Yeah. Number one, on the pro-housing regulations, I think that this is something that are going to motivate communities, because when the statute listed gave a list of what it might take to be a pro-housing community, and I don't think it's all of these, but it's like have fiscal incentives to encourage housing or reduce parking requirements. Yep. Are you going to go through this?
No, I wasn't going to, but yeah, we can.
Yeah, it's just really quick. Reduce impact fees, create workforce housing opportunities, reduce barriers for ADUs. A lot of things that communities can do. And then they will be given preference points in state competitions, like for affordable housing community or AHSC program or different things. And that, I think, is something that your local planning departments and city councils can really okay, we get a benefit for doing that. And then I also want to thank your leadership and well, not Paul's leadership, but your leadership.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
Sorry, just kidding, Paul. Just see everybody else is on their toes. What a lot of people don't realize, and I just want to make a point, is before this year, the whole RENA process was an unfunded mandate. So it was like the state would put money into housing, but they wouldn't put the money in behind planning for housing. And this is what the state got right this year, is you got to line up a lot of things, a lot of infrastructure ducks and a lot of planning ducks and a lot of environmental ducks land and some financial ducks to get all the housing, and that's what got right. So there's a couple of my talking points.
Yeah,
Keep going.
I could add on to that just a little bit too. At first, when the LEAP and the REAP and the pro housing came out as part of AB 101, the Governor's Budget Act, the timing wasn't quite as aligned as it could have been. We had LEAP applications due July 1st. Pro housing is not really technically due till summer of 2021. And then REAP applications were due January 31st. And the SB2 planning grants had already gone out. And it's like, well, how does this funding help people to be pro housing to be more competitive for funding? It wasn't quite lined up well. But with the recent changes, the governor and his leadership extended those deadlines out, so they're now all aligned. And so the LEAP isn't due until January 31st. They all have the same expenditure deadlines, and we're lucky enough to preserve discretion in each one of these standard agreements, so we can go back and rescope and think about how you can be pro housing and be more competitive for state funding resources.
That's great. Yeah, thank you guys. That was very helpful. And Michael, if you go to the next slide or two, it kind of covers what we were talking about here. You know, so the continuum, I guess you could look at is that, you know, you've got the funding from the planning grants, you've got the incentives, and then on the accountability side, you know, we are working with jurisdictions one-on-one, making sure that we can help bring all housing elements into compliance if they're not, or help meet some of our some of these bigger needs that some jurisdictions are seeing, you know, that are probably different than their fit cycle. You can go to the next slide, please. Another one. So, like I mentioned, COGS and multi-agency working groups are the recipients. Next slide.
1 second. You have housing money coming through COGS. So Bill Higgins,
Yeah.
why is it coming through COGS? Is this just RENA, or are there other reasons why the state chose a lot of money to come through the jurisdictions in the San Joaquin Valley through COGS?
Oh, that's funny. That was one of my talking points, Michael. So
Okay.
I thank you for asking. No, actually, I think when the legislature was talking about this, we've all, through SB 375 and the regional transportation plans, we've acknowledged this housing transportation connection, but so far all the funding for that process has come from the transportation side, and sometimes transportation gets more emphasized. There is a regional component in terms of the RENA, the regional needs allocation, where regions are making decisions when they assign the responsibility to zone for housing at the local level. And so this is to have a more robust conversation, more robust buy-in. Certainly the legislature has instituted a lot more penalties for not producing housing or not zoning for housing. And so the LEAP and the REAP and the SB2 funding was meant to be an incentive in order to comply. And the legislature basically kicked 2/3 of the money out. There are a little bit more, the LEAP and the SB2 money, those go directly to local jurisdictions. But there was an acknowledgement that there's a regional component here, that you could, where you were going to put more housing, you could also put more planning money that a state formula couldn't actually kind of come up with. There was also an acknowledgement that regional buy-in would be better, because usually when the state develops programs and awards money on a competitive basis, Turlock and Farmersville is always competing with Long Beach and Pasadena, right? And so that leads to this very unequal competitive process. So here you have the best projects in the valley that, if you're going to have any kind of competition, you could create a more fair competition. If that's what you guys decide to do with the Valley Share money, Robert can get into that. But you're going to, between the balance of local allocation and all that, you have more levers to address the valley's needs.
Yep. Next slide, if you show that, Michael, it'll show the San Joaquin Valley multi-agency working group that's made up of. So we've got the COGS of Fresno, Kern, Kings, Madera, Merced, San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and Tulare all working together. And Michael and Robert will kind of talk about how that valley-wide work is gonna occur. But you'll see it's almost $19 million going to this group, which was created in statute, and we'll be working together moving forward. You can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to quickly, and we don't have to spend too much time on this.
Hey, Nur, you should also say that the Valley is getting almost $6 million more than its formula share, because it's being asked to work together. So
yes,
if it was divvied up equally, there would have been, you know, substantial less amount of money for the San Joaquin Valley. But the state said, look, you know, we know SCAG, the 6 counties in the SCAG region, they have an infrastructure to work together. The San Joaquin Valley has less of an infrastructure. So for making you work together, we're going to give you another $6 million to dole out to your local communities as kind of an incentive. But this is just an example, I think, that the Valley benefited more than some of your bigger MPO brethren, or sisterhood, however you want to call them.
Yep, thank you for that reminder. Yes, so that 18.9 million includes that $6 million addition. And so just quickly, I wanted to kind of talk through the types of things that REAP applicants can apply for, because I feel like some of these items are just particularly relevant given some of the new laws that have passed around housing elements in the state and how to meet those regional housing needs. So for example, you know, the money, you know, will be, has some required activities. We need to be looking at an education outreach strategy. So, you know, as Bill was saying, the Valley received that extra $6 million. We are, you know, seeing that money being used to do an education outreach strategy to connect all of those different cogs and all of the different components that would be necessary. You know, I feel like Robert brought up a good point recently about how, you know, historically housing has not been top of mind for some of the cogs, but you know, now being able to connect housing and transportation and have the planners and the building departments in the different cities and counties talk to the housing departments and talk to folks on the ground and you know, collaborate together to really address the needs, I think is going to be really key here. And so each of the recipients is also looking at current best practices regionally and statewide. We are, as the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program, we've worked with CalCog to connect all of the recipients so that they can learn from each other and talk to each other and share those best practices, all the way down to sharing applications, sharing resources even. So we're hoping that this connection and collaboration will benefit the Valley as well. You can go to the next slide.
And I should say there, your own Robert Phipps is playing a very important role, you know, in terms of sharing what the Valley's doing, and everybody else is learning from Robert. There you go, Robert.
Definitely.
You owe me $5, Robert. Okay.
So I just wanted to highlight some of the eligible activities that I think are important. You know, as far as an improved methodology for that 6th cycle of regional housing needs allocation we were talking about, you know, some of the things that the state is really bringing to the forefront here is, you know, equitable housing supply and choices, infill and environmental resources, job housing partnerships, incorporating affirmatively furthering fair housing. I was listening to the workshop on Friday on racial equity at the summit, and I thought that was really helpful. You know, we were hearing from Tulare County and their housing authority about how they had been trying to incorporate AFFH into their work, and had really been going through a data-driven process, you know, prior to the recent announcement of the rollback of AFFH. But I thought it was really helpful to kind of hear that they wanted to take a regional approach and coordinate with Fresno and Kings. And so, you know, I'd love to maybe circle back with Tulare and maybe Robert and Michael and see, you know, if we could have that kind of conversation through REAP. But that's just one example of the types of things or best practices that we're looking at, you know, and things that you could do with this money. And you can keep going, Michael, to the next slide. So you can also use the funds to sub-allocate to jurisdictions and sub-regional sub-regions in your area to do some of this programming and some of this work. And Michael and Robert will talk a little bit more about how they have structured their sub-allocation program. But you know, each REAP recipient has kind of come up with their own way of doing it. Some are doing it via looking at the regional housing needs allocation and divvying up the money based off of that. But it's really, you know, in coordination with HCD, where you know each of the REAP applicants has kind of figured out what works best for them in their communities. You can go to the next slide. You can also use the funds to build capacity, get technical assistance, temporary staffing, planning, and consultants to help complete those local planning and zoning documents. I think this is really important and key, especially now when I think a lot of jurisdictions are struggling during COVID and you know, kind of seeing a lack of capacity or lower capacity. You know, we really want to see what we can do here to provide some capacity building ideas and innovative tools. HCD, you know, and Bill will talk about this more on the technical assistance side, but we're going to be working very closely with all recipients on creating regional toolkits for technical assistance to really see what we can provide from the state side in the administrative funds that we've received in order to provide that assistance. You can go to the next slide. And then finally, the last eligible activity is just the very basic activity admin costs that go along with running a new program. You know, we realize that having a direct allocation, you know, it's still work for the staff and for these regions and communities to figure out how to do it and what to do. And so, you know, we want to make sure that the funds can be used accordingly and they have the support that they need and can go from there. So we don't really need to go into some of the other slides in terms of ineligible activities other than, you know, this money can't be used for actual development of projects, you know, as far as development of housing. So we're not paying for doors, as we like to say it, unfortunately. But we can help you plan in a way that will make you more competitive for the programs that would then fund that housing production. And then I guess with that, I kind of just wanted to jump to Bill and see if we could talk more on the TA side. Bill and Michael, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I'll be kind of quick on the TA side. So there's technical assistance and what HCD has done, I think pretty smartly, is know that with all this money that's going out there, that there'll be local agencies and regional agencies that might need the same kind of technical assistance. And for example, I might use the Orange County example because I know that a couple of months ago, you guys, the Orange County as a region came together around this, and there was a meeting in Orange County, of course, is within the SCAG region. And you were at I think you were at the meeting and others. I guess this was back when we could have meetings, now that I think about it. And there was a discussion of how they're going to reach their RENA number. Now, for those of you who don't know, Los Angeles got a RENA number that was about 3 times higher than what they had, or the SCAG region, than what they had the previous session. So their RENA numbers are very, very high. And the way that Orange County wanted to address at least part of that responsibility was they jointly agreed that they could mutually develop a pretty aggressive ADU process, which would be beyond the standards that HCD had, kind of approved of in the past, and they didn't have this kind of performance behind them. And they're working with you. The technical assistance is working to kind of develop strategies and ordinances and about how you could count and do it in a meaningful way. And we don't know how that's all going to look yet, but I think what's really interesting is the conversation is happening and the partnership is forming for the state and region to kind of work on an aggressive policy together. And that's happening because there's facilitators there, and there's people there, and there's experts there that are bringing and convening and getting a strategy to form. And that's Orange County's example. I don't know what ADU is the right answer, accessory dwelling unit is the right answer for the San Joaquin Valley. I know that one thing that Robert has talked about some is, building a shelf of expert consultants that would be available for a lot of the small communities up and down the valley who don't have sophisticated housing planning staff. So maybe that's something that you guys look at in terms of, and we'll let Robert talk about. I think the opportunities here is that you can achieve an economies of scale in your strategies, right? If 3 or 4 or 5, 10, or even 40 communities are going to build on the same strategy, you all don't need to go out and hire a separate consultant. And partly because HCD is provided through the LEAP program, a firm, PlaceWorks, a firm that has technical assistance on staff to actually help you walk through some of the details that you would normally hire a consultant for. And they've also done that for the regions. And so we're looking forward to, leaning on that capacity, because it's also kind of a place where that experience is growing. So we're not all creating, 492, I'm trying to remember how many cities are in the state, 492 independent wheels, right? We can all kind of work from the same axle. But I think also that will lead to some innovation. And that's actually what I'm most excited to see. For example, in Orange County, like the ADU, they're coming up and they're really putting their cards on the table, and we're looking at the way to solve problems differently. So when I look at the technical assistance, we don't know what it's going to look like yet in the San Joaquin Valley. You guys are having discussions. We're going to figure that out. But I'm hopeful that it's going to enable you to do great things. It's not just money, figure out the problem on your own. It's like, here's money, here we have some experts. Let's figure out what you can do that's most impactful, that's best for the valley. It may be different than what's good for Skag or Sacramento or the Bay Area, and work it out for yourself. And that, I think, makes a lot of sense, because like the analogy I used before, pick your city, Turlock should not be competing with the city of Fremont, because there's just 2 different markets, 2 different scenarios, 2 different income. There's just too many different factors to throw the same solution at them. So I want to leave time for for Robert to talk about what's going on in the Valley, and then I think we'll have some time for questions after, right?
Yes. Okay, Noor, did you want to touch on anything else on your slides?
No, actually, I should have said advance, because those are some of the examples of things that might, I mentioned the ADUs, but you can just go through that list. I don't know what you guys are going to come up with, but
Right.
Those are some ideas.
Yep,
Okay.
just some ideas. Yep.
Yeah.
And we can share these slides at the end. But yeah, like I said, or like Bill said, HCD is going to have some just statewide technical assistance on a lot of things, site inventory, affirmatively furthering fair housing, housing on building lots, and then anything else that you guys come up with that we don't have, let us know, and we'll work with you on it.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it, folks, from the state, the big picture of what's happening. Now, Robert, before we jump in, let me try to summarize again, because people on the phone, panelists here, we talk this language all day long. They may not be tracking it. So state's really interested in planning. So the state had SB2 and LEAP with an L. Funds are available now. SB2 closed already, but that was local planning money, mostly focusing on land use planning for housing for jurisdictions. Now we have REAP with an R, which is a little bit more encompassing, and it actually has a lot more flexibility built into it, as well, as you'll see in the next slides that come up. Because not only do we have to do land use planning, there's a whole other host of valley-wide activities that are under that rubric as well. And then, as Bill and Noor talked about, the state also has a lot of funding available that they put into technical assistance that will provide additional support to the efforts underway in the San Joaquin Valley, for example. So just wanted to pause there, give that recap, and I'll turn it back over to Robert. Robert, I'll jump in here and there as we move along here. So go ahead. You're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Mhm.
Yeah. So my name is Robert Phipps. I'm the Deputy Director with Fresno Council of Governments and heading up the Regional Early Action Planning efforts for the San Joaquin Valley. Fresno COG is also serving as the what's known as the fiscal agent in statute for this effort. So under the budget bill and AB Assembly Bill 101 from 2019, we had this this pot of money that was established, specifically in terms of the valley, as Noor and Michael, Bill have all mentioned, a little bit different than several of the other regions in that we're one of only two that in statute has to have a what's known as a working group, a regional working group, to administer these funds. And so in our case, again in statute is specified as being 3 representatives from each county. We have to have 1 large city representative, 1 small city representative, and then a supervisor from the Board of Supervisors from each county, at least 1 supervisor. So the 24 people total, representing all 8 counties, and together we have to steer this ship in terms of how the funds are going to be allocated. We present very much like a separate board, present all the information to them as we've been going along, and get their buy-in, hopefully, for these plans. So next slide, please.
And this group has met a couple of times already in January and June of this year.
Right. And this is, again, nearly $19 million that we're talking about $6 million of which is, and this is very important, about $6 million of that is scheduled strictly for valley-wide activities. So that is to say that whereas there's a lot of flexibility with regard to the how the funds are used, you saw some of the best practices and recommendations. That is on kind of a region by region or county by county, in the Valley's case, basis. But 6 million of that has to be for coordinated tasks and activities that have a valley-wide scope to them. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on in the coming months. In terms of some of the concepts that we've come up with is, the improved, we have to have the improved methodology for the 6-cycle RENA that's already been discussed. We have not yet seen our RENA numbers, but we anticipate, or at least Fresno has not, but we anticipate anywhere from 1.5 to 3 times. I think Bill mentioned in the SCAG region, Los Angeles, 3 times the amount of housing, the number of units that are going to be required in the next cycle. And so that's what all of this is building toward. In some cases, there's going to be a sub-allocation of funds directly to the jurisdictions that they could use to leverage their LEAP funds. If they wanted to. Of course, there will be technical assistance as has been discussed, and that includes, we anticipate that we're going to see some temporary staffing, quite frankly, because, the city's COVID has had such an impact on sales tax dollars and, other forms of revenue that we fully anticipate that some of the funds that are distributed directly to the jurisdictions might go for continuing to pay their own people, their own community planning folks, and then of course administrative costs. Michael, if you want to move it down. So yeah, we've talked about this. There's the technical assistance we anticipate happening on both a valley-wide and an individual jurisdiction basis. Where we have seen a lot of interest, at least in Fresno in particular, but I imagine this is going to be true throughout the valley, is in particular the infrastructure planning, as far as sewers, water systems, roads. How do we handle all of this influx of housing that is going to be anticipated and the populations, and especially, as we see climate change and in terms of water level, sea level rise, we anticipate that the valley is going to continue to grow, probably at a faster clip than much of the rest of the state, because of the fact that it's inland. So even though you have issues surrounding air quality and climate, heat related issues in the valley historically, it's still, the housing is still cheaper here. And so we expect that you're still going to see an exodus from a lot of the large urban areas that's going to be driving this need for greater housing. Some of the other ideas that we've discussed has been feasibility studies to determine the best, most efficient locations for housing, feasibility studies for affordable housing projects on surplus properties that may be owned by school districts or offices of education. And then we also already discussed the temporary staffing and consulting. Go ahead, Michael. Thank you. So we do have, to date, we do have bylaws established, as Michael mentioned. Our working group, or the Reapers, as we call them, who is chaired by the Grim Reaper, have met actually a total of 3 times. We had the initial application that was solicited for 4.7 million, and this money is coming, by the way, very importantly, coming in advance as opposed to on a reimbursement basis. And that is a very key issue, because so many of our jurisdictions, and the COGs themselves for that matter, don't have the funds to be able to front this money on our own, because for the COGs, our funding is transportation. And so it would be ineligible in many cases, federal transportation dollars that would be ineligible for these kinds of activities if it were not provided in advance. And a lot of the smaller jurisdictions, they can't afford to put this money up front, or, in many cases they would have already done it. And so our first application for 4.7 million, 25%, that was solicited, and then very kindly HCD, thank you very much, Noor, solicited the remainder of the valley-wide funds, which is amounted to about 5.5 million. So about $10.2 million total that we've already put in the applications and signed the master agreement, and which should be coming to us very, very shortly. We did issue an RFP for a valley-wide coordinator, or as we were calling it, the overlord, and that is going to wind up being Mr. Segala, I'm happy to say. And then, of course, ongoing consultation among all the 8 MPOs and with HCD. And I do want to return the favor for Bill to point out that, especially with regard to the valley-wide funds, that probably would not have happened, that additional 6 million, had it not been for Bill getting that into statute. Bill was real key in helping
kill
to
the other
develop that
regions.
statute. This is a valley-wide conference. They're not listening. Okay, moving on. Right. So of the initial application, again, the first 25%, you can see the breakdown of how that money is going to be spent. Now, what we anticipate, what several of the MPOs or the COGs have already told us, is that they want to set some of that aside for their RENA efforts, at the COG level to begin with, because we anticipate the RENA not only to be more voluminous in terms of the units, but also potentially more contentious. And that's something that, we've seen before, typically in the larger urban areas. But as the demand increases and the number of housing units, that are required, have to be doled out, and especially when we're talking about affordable, very affordable income units, we expect that there might be some tension in terms of how many units are distributed to which jurisdictions. And of course, the COG is going to be right in the middle of that in each county, with the exception, I think, of Madera. I believe HCD is going to do that on Madera's behalf because they're not technically a COG. But in terms of how that process plays out, hopefully everybody will get along. Everything will be very smooth. But we have seen in other parts of the state where jurisdictions have sued each other or sued the COGs over it. And so some of the funds will be set aside initially by the COGs for their own RENA efforts. And then we did have about $500,000 set aside in that first application for valley-wide activities, which we anticipated being, we were calling it a white paper. It's going to be considerably more than that. But a kind of a comprehensive housing report that examines the inventory, not just of available units, but also in terms of the available land, where the zoning exists for additional housing, and exactly the kind of situation that we're looking at with regard to how much more housing can we accept without making drastic changes to begin with, and then what are the next steps going to be in terms of what kinds of zoning changes or additional space is going to have to be allocated. Go ahead.
So just real quick. So again, so these allocations to these COGs were out of the first 5 million or so. You can expect about 2/3 of the money of the 20 million coming to the Valley, more or less, don't quote me, running through the COGs and this sort of formula. This was based on a population basis. So these are sort of the numbers that you would expect to see if you were to inflate it to say 12 million or something at the bottom line. Those would be, you would look at those distributions. Each COG is going to be empowered to prioritize and make guidance in terms of how much they keep for themselves for RENA and how much they pass on to the jurisdictions. So that's an ongoing process, different for each COG.
Right. Yeah. So then we had the second application. Again, thank you to Noor and Paul, HCD, for soliciting that from us, because it does make our lives so much easier in terms of, funding that comes up front. This is not reimbursable money. But again, specifically for valley-wide activities, with valley-wide tasks and valley-wide deliverables. So we've already talked about, the comprehensive housing report, some of the other ideas that have been kind of tossed around, but nothing has been agreed upon yet is, establishing a housing trust fund, the technical assistance that Bill mentioned, for which we may be able to leverage or, hope to leverage PlaceWorks in terms of a lot of the research for developing what could be a surplus property database, standard housing plans. A lot of this, again, we're hoping we're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. And then there will be other valley-wide activities to be determined. And this is probably a good point to talk about, some of the obstacles that we anticipate we may need to, that we'll be facing, because there's this flood of planning money that's coming in to get all of the jurisdictions ready for housing, to shore up their housing elements and their general plans. And so what we've seen, certainly in cases like this, similar cases where you've had transportation money, is that the consultant pool suddenly gets very thin. We're anticipating multiple consultants, especially for the valley-wide activities, that we'll have Michael as the coordinator, but the concern is that we either will not be able to find the consultants, we'll get a trickle in terms of proposals of what we're used to, or the prices will be inordinately high because this is going on all around the state. And so we are a little concerned about, what's the potential for running into an issue with a consultant availability. But
Robert,
we're going to burn that bridge when we come to it. Yeah.
Robert, I'm an optimist, so I will say that I think that might be dampened somewhat by the availability of the technical assistance contract, that you already have consultants that you can ask to do specific things. It may not be, there may be limits to that, and then your point is well taken, but
Right.
I'm optimistic that some of what you're going to need is going to be available to you and already paid for.
Well, and also, you know, I wasn't trying to be a pessimist about it, simply, you know, acknowledging what some of the obstacles will be. But for example, in Fresno's case, there is definitely going to be opportunity to leverage other funding sources, you know, because, for example, PlaceWorks, which Bill mentioned, handling, you know, the technical assistance contract, the large one for the state, Fresno has also hired PlaceWorks specifically for its RENA work that it's going to be doing on an individual basis. And so, you know, we certainly anticipate some give and take and some leveraging between, you know, kind of local RENA money versus the valley-wide RENA funds, and then also the statewide. You know, so there is going to be opportunities we anticipate again for some overlap.
Can everybody hear Robert
attention.
okay?
I can, Michael.
Okay. I've never been accused of being too quiet, Michael. That's okay.
I just real quick on that TA, I just like to say it's not just PlaceWorks. We have a super team that includes a variety of consultants, and but there'll be more for that down the road.
Sure. Okay, Michael, can you go ahead and go to the next slide? Michael? Uh-oh. There we go. We lost Michael, can you hear us? You're on mute.
Yes,
You're
I can
muted.
hear you. Did I lose you, or did
Yeah.
everybody lose each other?
We lost you, I think.
Interesting.
So we need
Okay.
you to put the screen back up.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Buddy. Hold on.
Or if you want, just make it up, Robert.
Yeah.
Close us out.
You're on a fly.
Actually,
Oh,
I can do that.
Now, can
All
you
right.
see it now?
Okay, yeah, go ahead and go on to the next.
Okay. Oops.
Oops.
All right, right there.
Right.
That sums it all up. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the chart that describes exactly how much money is available, and you know, where most of that money has been identified to date. But what you'll notice is that there's still a substantial amount, the remaining funds TBD, almost $9 million, that we don't know. We don't know where that funding is, how that funding is going to be used at this point, because that is beyond the valley-wide and administrative costs that we anticipate. And so, you know, we know that in general, it's going to be distributed down to the individual jurisdictions. The question is how. So next slide, please. So, I can tell you, you know, in terms of the how, what I can tell you is that each region is choosing to handle that a little differently. And it goes, as you might anticipate on this spectrum, from the highly structured, very formal, down to a much more informal process that might include, you know, direct suballocations to each jurisdiction. But that is going to depend on the individual cog. So again, once you remove that 6 million, you have, you know, approximately almost 13 more million that is going directly to the cogs and then down to the jurisdictions. So for example, in the north, with San Joaquin and Stockton, they have a very formal framework through which they're developing a completely regional platform for competition, and identifying what regional goals they want to see furthered, you know, beyond the valley-wide. And they will be judging the projects that are brought to them for funding based on that regional approach. You know, what good does this do for the entire region? In Fresno, we're looking at it similarly, but on kind of a more community by community basis, in that, you know, we have X amount of funding available that can be distributed down to the jurisdictions. So bring us your projects. Tell us what you would like to do. Tell us how it's going to help your community and help you get established, and we'll have a scoring committee that will decide, and assign points to those applications and determine which of those, we can fund in kind of a priority order, so that if more funds are available at some point, we can continue the good work. And of course, again, remembering that the 250 million that is coming through REAP is also being mirrored on a statewide basis, is also being mirrored by another 250 million that's going directly to the jurisdictions on a formula basis. So we will begin, we have the program manager in place. We'll start sending out RFPs for all of the valley-wide activities. We anticipate the funds from HCD, again, that first 10 million coming in hopefully by the end of this month. Begin working with each MPO on RENA coordination, and then establishing the priorities for the remaining funds. Go ahead, Michael.
I believe that's it, Mr. Phipps.
Okay. So I hope that's within time, and certainly happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I think there was a question about outreach, and part of the perspective was ensuring as this decision making is happening that there's pretty solid representation from a variety of perspectives. And can you just maybe talk about how you might be going about your outreach and your education, and how that might be kind of deployed at a more COG basis as well?
Yeah, we see that. I think that we see that as being one of the valley-wide activities, that it makes sense to be doing that, to drum up the interest and let people know exactly what's going on. But it is specified in AB 101, the statute, that we do have to have a very robust outreach program, and certainly, again, thanks to Bill and HCD, we have the funds to do that. And so, yeah, we anticipate, again, probably on a valley-wide basis, and to begin with, of course, it's going to focus on the jurisdictions and getting them on board, because what we're finding is that a lot of the communities themselves are unaware of this money, and what is possible to do with it. And so the first goal will be to inform, get all the jurisdictions up to speed on how this money can be used, and how it would benefit them. But we anticipate that outreach is going to be trickling down through a variety of means to the individual neighborhoods, and getting people's perspective on what kind of housing they would like to see. I don't know if it'll get into design, but that is certainly something that is possible. And so, yeah, we do anticipate a very robust outreach program.
I wanted to just, because I want to respect that. I think the question also talked about inclusive, being inclusive and bringing in different groups. And I know you're going to do that through your outreach process, Robert. Like you said, the state statute actually requires, just so we know how those folks were selected, the state statute requires that the city selection committee, which is the mayors of each county, select the 2 city representatives, and that the county representative be selected by the county. So there's an appointment process in statute, how those 24 people got selected. But I think to the point of inclusion and making sure that different races and ethnicities and all the different viewpoints that are the Valley, that has to be through a quality outreach process that I know that was also funded. And I know that you guys are taking that on.
Right. There'll be a lot of that. So to answer that person's question, there has to be also in the statute a small city representative and a large city representative and a member of the COG board. So that ship already sailed. That committee's been established, but the statutes laid out what we thought was the best fair approach at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And was based on previous collaboration. That's the other thing, is that the Valley already had an informal group. The Valley Cogs had an informal group that we call the Policy Council, that provides, advice and consent on a lot of these issues, particularly with regard to legislation and how we align our transportation goals and so forth. And so we kind of built on that group in order to come up with the working group.
Yeah, just to square that off real quick with a question from the smaller city. In addition to that valley-wide effort, if you will, and all the inclusion now happening out of that, as the COGS or counties develop, not the county itself developing it, but develop their sub-allocations, there'll be more opportunity there. And then finally, we are developing our regionally based technical assistance plans. And for the Valley, that's on a county basis. Many times through the COGS, but everybody is invited to that table. So I would just kind of say there's three big areas where smaller cities.
Right. So another question, Robert, is what role can nonprofit developers play in this process? So again, this is just starting. The Valley, the 8 counties of the Valley have been a little slow to start, only because, as Robert was mentioning, we were waiting for the funding from the state in order to really take off on this effort. So you're good timing in terms of your questions, and I think the answer is we will have a lot of sort of outreach components to this and meetings and surveys and stuff, and you can definitely provide and stay close to us as we move forward on that process. But I think a lot of this is getting ready for housing. This is not, so nonprofit developers, this is money for housing preparation, not necessarily development, but we welcome your participation and help in getting us there.
Yeah, and I just add, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that at the valley-wide level, as well as at the sub-allocation level and the county-based or regionally based technical assistance level. Like, for example, I could see our nonprofit developers playing a role in a surplus sites inventory. I could see our nonprofit developers being involved in what kinds of tools can help incentivize development, that different types of things like that. So,
and technical assistance as well. I mean, we're going to be looking, we are going to be looking to the Valley Housing Collaborative, for example, to provide its input on, like I said, we've got $9 million that we're unclear. We really don't have any idea at this point how that's going to be spent at all. We're going to be looking to the communities and to the nonprofits for ideas on, what is the best use of that? What's the best bang for the buck?
And I'll just say that this is a nice to have a regional conversation with the nonprofit housing developers, because a lot of times when you get into a statewide conversation, the Bay Area and LA nonprofit developers drown everybody else out. And so this is a chance for, and the Valley, it may be more infrastructure than land availability, but we always hear land availability in the Bay Area. So I think that it's a real opportunity if you gauge that it will be a different forum for you and your voice will be louder.
Robert, another question. How can smaller cities become more intimately involved in this process?
I think we got that one, Michael.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is contact your COG. That's the very, very first thing, is to find out exactly how your COG is going to be running the show, essentially, because again, if you take away that $6 million, the remainder is going down to each COG to be sub-allocated. And so how much is each COG getting, and how are they planning on getting that done? Is it going to be a direct sub-allocation to jurisdictions, or is it going to be like a project application process? Those are probably the two most common ones that I've heard so far.
And
if you're from a city, which I'm just going to guess you are, each city has a board member on that COG. So that's another way to find out which city council member is the representative on that COG and have a conversation.
Okay.
And Bill talked about the technical assistance. That's roughly $4 million through 2023. We had some
But that's statewide, though. That's statewide, not just for the Valley, right?
Yeah, correct. And then we had some meetings over the summer 2019, and we're following those up with surveys, and this is basically a survey of how you want to prioritize these TA dollars for you at a county level.
Yeah.
And so please keep your eyes open for that survey. That'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks or so.
That's right.
All right, we'd like to continue to open it up to questions from participants on this webinar. Andrea, are they free to speak?
So if any attendees want to ask a question, feel free to use the raise hand feature and I can go ahead and unmute you.
So,
But otherwise, feel free to continue sending in your questions via the Q&A feature or the chat feature.
Well, this goes through 3:30.
well, we should have had Robert talk longer.
Yeah.
I bet people won't be mad if we end early.
It's funny. Nobody's ever asked me to do that either.
I thought we were a 3 o'clock thing.
No, 3:30, but you know, we don't have to go to 3:30 if there's no more questions.
Actually, Robert, I do have a question for you. Have you established a website or a kind of a one-stop place for people to get information, or is that a question for Michael as the technical assistant person?
No, but it is a touchy subject. No, I can answer it. It's just a touchy subject because see, right now, again, we're running this off of what we would normally call matching funds or our local funds, funding sources.
Oh, I see.
We don't have any money yet to do any of this.
So,
and so
when you get money, will you be putting up a one-stop kind of information stop for people?
that would make sense, right?
That's all part of
Absolutely.
the scope.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have anticipated that delay. My bad. But you'll have a way for if the nonprofit housing developer, the small city wants to engage and just know what's going on.
Of course.
The meetings will be posted. Everything will be transparent. There'll be opportunities to engage.
Well, and that's already happening with regard to the meetings because the meetings are being posted through the COGs. Again, as part of or it should be through the regular COG activity, with their own agendas and whatnot. So that we've met 3 times. I think, Michael, the next meeting would be scheduled probably for what, November?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should discuss it, yes. Coming up, yeah.
Michael, I think there's a question of whether the slides will be available. You want to address that?
I will address that through through Andrea. She can tell me how we can distribute them to the attendees. That would be great. Yes, and so the answer is yes.
Yes, so Michael, if you could go ahead and email me the slides, then I can go ahead and email them out to all attendees. Also, we will be posting it on the San Joaquin Valley Housing Collaborative website once we get the slide deck. So we will make that available.
Okay, so
looks like we're being recorded.
Email it to Andrea.
Very funny, Robert. Well, I could tell jokes or ask Paul where his.
Because Bill could take up the rest of the time.
Yeah, I know. I could.
Bill's got to tell me how he does the soft focus thing. Is that the light? Is that
it must
the additional
be the
light you
light.
bring? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe I have a blur.
You look like 30 years younger. It's amazing. It's
maybe I need to clean my camera. So, so I don't know. Actually, I'll have to check what I did.
Okay, so Andrea, what do you want us to do here? There's no more questions and it's 3:15.
Yeah, no worries. So since there's no more questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank all the panelists for your information today and all the resources that are available. This was very informative, and I'm sure attendees took away some tools from today's session. Attendees, thank you so much for sharing your afternoon with us. I want to invite you all to come back to Wednesday's session, which is Through the Storm, Leadership Strategies in Challenging Times. That will be Wednesday at noon. If anyone has any follow-up questions, we will go ahead and keep the line open a little bit longer, but otherwise have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
All right, do I look clearer now, Robert?
No, you still look great. I mean,
I don't know why
it's like the backlighting is, I don't know, or do you have a filter or something? Because
cheesecloth. Yes.
Is that what it is? Cheesecloth? Okay. Shroud of Turin thing here going on.
Yeah,
Like a Martha Stewart.
you know, it makes people feel warm and fuzzy.
It does.
You know,
No, I think it works great.
there you go.
See, I mean, it's the you know, nobody wants to look. I've got the face for radio, so I need to figure out a way to copy that.
While we're waiting for questions, a quick story. I once had a board meeting, and I was doing it by phone. I was in the office and I was dressed for radio. I was in my, casual shorts, and I was actually bare feet in a Holy t-shirt. And in walked Scott Haggerty, because he was across the street at a CSAC thing, who's on my board. And I suddenly had a board member in my room. And I said, what? And he outed me. All right.
Looks like Paul caught one of the Q&A questions on the.
Yeah, both Paul and Nur caught it.
All right. Thank you. Good job. 2 thumbs way up. Thank you, guys.
I appreciate that. It was all good. And I was going to use this background, but I decided it would be a little bit too. And this one is just.
You look like Keanu. I can see that. Yeah.
Or this one, which is leaf cutter ants.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know that that's the best message either.
No. So I kept it. All right. That's enough. I assume, we're still recording. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I think we're good to go. So if you all need to hop off to head into another meeting or want 15 minutes back of your day, feel free to jump off. Thank you all so much for your time today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.